مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. That rida, that satisfaction. Where does that come from? What do we really want at the end of our life? You know, I was listening to a talk once by a gentleman who he said that he was an emergency medical responder. And he said, when I was being trained for my job, I had not dealt with death firsthand. You know, when you're in a profession where you are dealing with death firsthand, it really changes your perspective. At least it should change your perspective, because you are seeing the ultimate reality unfold in front of you on a daily basis. So he says, I was not really prepared, so they were preparing us. They were saying that, you know, when you arrive at the scene of an accident, that, you know, you have to check the vital signs of the patient, you have to stabilize all these things, and all these, you know, a checklist of things that to do. He says, but even with this checklist, still, psychologically, I was not prepared to deal with death, this reality. He said, we were taught to deal with a situation where they called it, I believe, imminent doom. That means that you know, as an emergency medical responder, that I cannot do anything for this person anymore. They're losing too much blood. They're about to go into cardiac arrest. There's nothing that I can do to help them survive in that way. The chances are very little. He says, when I would come onto a scene of an accident, and I would find this person is distressed, maybe they're losing blood, and I know that they're about to pass away, and they would be panicked, and they would see me, and they would ask me, he said, they would ask me, am I going to die? He says, it was very difficult for me to tell them the truth. I knew that they were going to die, but it was very difficult for me to tell it. See, this is projection, right? Remember I said about Amir al-Mu'mineen, what did he say about fear? He said, إِذَا هِبْتَ أَمْرًا فَقَعْ فِيهِ. If you fear something, lean into it. For the imagination that you create in your mind is greater than the actual thing that's happening. The imagination, it amplifies that fear. It amplifies that terror. So he says, I could not get myself to tell them the truth. I would always say, yes, you are going to live, and then they would die. He says, until one day I realized I can't live with myself. How am I telling these people? I'm the last person that they're seeing, and I'm not telling them the truth? I'm the last person this person is seeing, and I cannot tell them the truth of the situation? He said, one day I decided that I was going to start telling the truth. He said, I came across a young man who was involved in a really bad motorcycle accident. And as I was there reading his vitals, I was checking all these things, I realized that he was not going to make it. He asked me, he said, am I going to live? He said, I decided that moment to tell the truth. I told him, no. No, sadly, you will not. He said, I thought that he was going to freak out. I thought he was going to panic and that he was going to die in a panic state, and this would be even worse. He said the exact opposite happened. He said he had complete submission. Taslim, he gave up, he stopped fighting. He stopped fighting. He stopped resisting. He said, I realized that if this is the case with one individual, then what if I say the truth to every individual I come across? So he said, I started telling the truth to every person that I knew they were going to die. I would tell them the truth. He said, as I started to tell them the truth, they began to reveal certain things. And he said, I noticed patterns in what people would express in the final moments of their life. He says, there's three things I noticed. Number one is people want forgiveness. At the end of their life, this is when we really ask for forgiveness. He tells the story of a man who he did not have the best relationship with his sons. And imagine, remember, this is a stranger. This medical responder is a stranger. He's not a therapist. He's not a counselor. He's nothing, not a best friend, nothing like this. He's there to save the life. He hasn't been trained to counsel or anything like that. He said, the man started to tell me during his final moments that I had a falling out with my son. He says, all I want now is to know that my son has forgiven me for how I have wronged him. Forgiveness. We are seeking forgiveness. Why do we wait till the end of our life to seek forgiveness? What did Imam Ali alayhi salam say to his sons during his final moments as part of his wasiyah? He taught them, Al-Islahu dat al-Bayn, bring people together, reconcile. Al-Islahu dat al-Bayn afdalu min ammat as-salati was-siyam. To reconcile the relationship, to mend a relationship between two people who have fallen out is greater in reward than all of the prayers and all of the fasting that you can offer. In another hadith, أفضل من عبادة الثقلين. It is greater than all of the worship of all of mankind and all of jinn. If you were to count from the beginning of time to the end of time, every single human being and every single jinn, how much they've worshipped, Allah says you bring two people together, you deserve more reward than all of that. Fixing and mending relationships. Forgiveness, number one. Number two, he said, I noticed that people wanted to know that their life had meaning. He says, I came across a lady once who was involved in a very bad car accident. They had to use what they call the jaws of life. Have you heard the jaws of life? Yeah. It's like a big saw device that they cut through metal and whatever is twisted steel and mangled that you can't separate with it. They have to cut through it in order to pull someone out. They call it the jaws of life. So they had to bring that and just to try to rescue. And this was a lady who had spent her life fostering orphans in her home, fostering children in her home. And so she started to tell me, he's saying she started to tell me about her life and the things that gave her purpose and the things that gave her meaning. And that she just wanted to know that her life had some sort of purpose, had some sort of meaning. At the end of our life, we're not going to think this is how much I accumulated. This is how much I have in my bank account. No. That's not for us to worry about. That's for the people behind us who we leave behind to worry about. This is true. And this is what the hadith says. That when a man dies, when a human being dies, the angels ask, what did he send forth? ماذا قدم? What did he send forth? You send forth your good deeds, your evil, while the family and the ones who are left behind and humankind, those that are left behind, they ask, what did he leave behind? Angels say, what did he send forth? Mankind says, what did he leave behind for us? We're not going to be thinking about what we left behind in material, but what kind of legacy did you leave behind? You know, they tell the story of Alfred Nobel, the founder of the Nobel Prizes and economics and all these things. And do you know how he founded the prizes and how he founded his endowment? Yes, exactly. TNT. He had founded TNT. A few years ago, I was with my father and my brother. We were in Sweden, Stockholm. And we found the Nobel Museum. There's a Nobel Museum there. We didn't know about it. We found it accidentally. So we walked in, and I read the story of his life. Alfred Nobel was an inventor, a very intelligent man. And he came from a family, I believe his father had owned like weapons factories or something. And he had more than 300 patents. And he had the patent for TNT, explosive materials. So how did he change his life around? How did he change his life around? One day he was reading the newspaper. His brother, he had a brother who died before him, Ludwig. So someone thought, a French journalist thought that it was Alfred who had died. So he wrote an obituary. Imagine, he woke up one day and he's reading his own obituary. It was his brother who died. They thought it was, this journalist thought it was Alfred who died. And the title of it, you can go and look it up. The title of it was, The Death of the Merchant of Death. He didn't know people were calling him the Merchant of Death. He had to learn. How many of us will have this experience? Will we read our obituary? Or we will accidentally read our obituary? I mean, this is like a 1 in, I don't know how much chance, right? So he read his own description by what people thought about him. The Merchant of Death. He was responsible for devastation and destruction and all this. He decided, I don't want my legacy. Is this what I want my legacy to be about? So he changed his life. He said, I can't undo what I've already done, but I'm going to take whatever money I've made. And in that time, it was estimated to be in in today's valuation, adjusted for inflation, over $200 million. And he decided, I'm going to put it to good use. I'm going to reward people who find breakthroughs in science and math and technology and all this. And then in the 1960s, they developed the Peace Prize as well. This was Alfred Nobel. He read his own, what he thought was his obituary. It wasn't really, it was what people thought of him. That's why Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, in one hadith, he says, Kun wasiya nafsik. You be the executor of your will. Don't wait for someone else to execute your will. We're waiting for somebody else to execute our will. He says, Kun wasiya nafsik. You be your own executor of your will and treat yourself how you want others to treat you after your death. Don't wait for somebody else to treat you in a certain way after your death. You treat yourself with that same respect and esteem. Don't worry about how anybody else is going to perceive you after your death. You don't know. Maybe people, they're glorifying you today, but they can't wait to the moment you're in the ground. Yeah. I mentioned the narration the other day. Your true friends, and how many of us we have true friends like this? صَدِيقُكَ مَنْ صَدَقَكَ لَا مَنْ صَدَّقَكَ. Your friend is the one who tells you the truth, not the one that believes everything you say. So many people, they're surrounded by yes men. Yes, yes. Making you happy. Never telling you the truth about yourself. Never telling you what you need to fix about yourself. So legacy. How do we want to be known? So number one, he said forgiveness. Number two is meaning. He said the third thing I noticed in people is they just wanted to be remembered. We want to be remembered. We don't want to be forgotten. We don't want to be forgotten. He says I would come across people who they would ask, again, I'm a stranger. They don't know who I am. The first time meeting me. And last time. And they would say to me, are you going to remember me? Will you remember me? You don't, normally when you meet someone, say you meet someone on an airplane or something and you part ways, imagine how strange it would be to say to a person, are you going to remember me? It's a very awkward thing to say when you're parting ways. They say men, we can hang out with another guy for 12 hours and part ways and not even know his name.